Good evening. Welcome to week 4 of Vote Our Values at Valley Bible Church. Welcome to all of you who are live streaming us. Thank you, Miss Vanessa, for filling this great role for us and for sending out a little bit of advance notice of our delayed start time because Barry was watching the World Series. And now that we have that on the record for posterity, let's jump in. Let me pray for us and we'll dive right in. Father, thank you for giving us a country that gives us the duty to vote. And Lord, give us wisdom as we talk through the actual ballots that we're going to look at. And Lord, help us to have a lively discussion. And if anyone online wants to weigh in, Lord, we look forward to hearing from them as well. Bless this time that we have in Jesus' name. Amen. Very quick reminders of our previous weeks. This class, whatever we want to call it, is all based on worldview. Our worldview is nothing more than our view of the world, and our view of the world is the Bible, the Bible, the Bible. May our church's name never lose its middle name, Bible, Valley Bible Church. We do not really need to win. We want to win. But what we need to do is be godly. And so the purpose of this is that we would vote in a godly way based on the Bible. How's that? It doesn't mean we're always going to agree, especially as we are looking at very specific items on our ballots. You might as well know that on one of the issues, because of the discussion we had on Sunday morning, Kirk actually changed my mind on one of the votes that I was preparing to cast. It was a close call. We'll talk about it right at the end of our time together. It was a close call, and I was leaning one way, and in one sentence, he persuaded me to lean the other way. So the purpose of this isn't for me to tell you how to vote. It's for us to go one by one through what's on the ballot, and I will give us some background. I have my official voter guide. I have my sample ballot. I also have my actual ballot. That'll be the thing I won't refer to as much tonight because I always fill out my sample ballot in advance. Then I can sit down, and Beth and I can sit down together and have the same sort of conversation that we're having, and then we cast our votes. I would say this about voting. I would strongly recommend against putting your ballot in the mailbox. Here's the analogy that I came up with. If you are comfortable going to the bank and getting 5 crisp $100 bills, putting them in an envelope and sealing it and mailing it to yourself, then you should put your ballot in the mailbox. Otherwise, I am planning on taking my ballot downtown Stockton directly to the registrar of voters, and I'm going to walk into the building. I'm not going to put it in a drop box that's out on the street. I'm going to walk up to the counter and ask someone to actually give me a receipt for my ballot because I don't want there to be any doubt that it has arrived and that someone's taking responsibility for it because in my view, my ballot is worth much more than those 5 crisp $100 bills. So with that, power or patriotism, the only 2 reasons why I believe people run for office. For almost 20 years now, I've issued a challenge for people to come up with a 3rd reason. Go ahead, come up with those reasons. I'll slide it in. It's either part of power. People want power. They want to control other people. They think they're better, smarter, stronger, faster than their neighbors, or they're patriots. And it's possible to have patriots on both sides, people who care about our country, because the one thing both political parties do have in common is they both want the same result. They want a better world. It's just that our 2 political parties have such dramatically different ways of making that happen. Over a couple of weeks, we looked at some big issues. We're not going to look at them at all tonight, but we're going to mention them. We looked at the life issue. That takes into account abortion and end-of-life issues and a lot of things in between. We talked about gender issues, and we just want to continue the reminder that we at Valley Bible Church and God Himself and Jesus Christ love everyone. And if you're struggling with a gender issue, this is a place where you can come and hear truth spoken in love, and we will help you through that confusion. We talked about religious freedom, and particularly the First Amendment, and our right to peaceably assemble, and our right for the government to make no law against the establishment of our faith in Jesus Christ. We talked about gun ownership, the importance of being able to protect ourselves. We talked about national security, our ability to protect our nation. We talked about immigration, and I shared my view of immigration. I'm a little bit of a contrarian. I believe that we should have unlimited legal immigration. I believe that anyone who came to this country and says that they haven't broken any laws, but the first thing they did when they came was break a law by coming in, should receive no quarter from our country, because you've built it on a rotten foundation. However, I also believe that if you do it the right way, if you have a family sponsor you, and you want to become an American, I think we have plenty of room for however many million of people a year even can find sponsors to bring them in and help underwrite their first 5 years in our country. And finally, we talked about racism. And we agreed that the Bible teaches that there's one race. It's the human race. The color of your skin is absolutely irrelevant. It just means that you have more pigment or less pigment in your skin than someone else. God made everyone, and it started with Adam and Eve, and every person from that time forward spills out of that. Therefore, racism has no place in our culture or society. We also agreed, though, that Martin Luther King Jr. Would be completely aghast at claims that America is structurally racist today, systemically racist today, because he actually lived through what that actually was, with bathrooms based on the color of your skin, lunch counters based on the color of your skin, seats on a bus based on the color of your skin. Not that there aren't always places that we can improve, and yes, there are certainly idiots here and there who don't hold to our beliefs relative to race, but they are the exception in America today, not the rule. We also talked about some other possible issues, Israel, the environment, education, and there are more. And every one of these we've looked at through the lens of Scripture. With that, if you brought your sample ballot with you and you want to look at it, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we're going to go through this sheet of paper, and I'm going to tell you the issue as I see it and ask your take. Because again, this isn't about me telling you how to vote. It's not even about me telling you how I'm going to vote. That will come out in a lot of it. But this is a chance for us to discuss anything that we need to discuss and hopefully come to some sort of a consensus or not on any given issue. So let's vote. The first up is the presidency of the United States. There are 5 or 6 different candidates on the ballot. I'm going to tell you that America has a two-party system, and in my estimation, a vote for any but the 2 major parties is a wasted vote because we have never been close to electing a third-party candidate. So that means we either vote to re-elect President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, or we vote for former Vice President Joe Biden and California Senator Kamala Harris. What's your sense? Barry says there's no choice. So what is your choice then if there's no choice? And Donald Trump 2020. Tell me why. Why don't we hand him that microphone, actually, as I'm thinking about it. Thanks, Ray. And we can just leave it on for the hour, I think. Barry's mentioning the life issue. Al Mohler, the president of Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, sent out a letter yesterday where I think he rightly said Donald Trump is the most pro-life president in American history by his actions. And 4 years ago, a lot of us, including me, wondered if he was selling us a bill of goods. And he's made good on it. And he has been very vigorously pro-life.
Yeah, along with that, I think the Supreme Court nominations that he's made have been really, really good nominations, and then added to the Supreme Court, as we all know, Amy Barrett just recently.
Along with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. I think through the lens of Scripture, through our worldview, I agree with you. I think all three of those nominations are pretty extraordinary, and I just have to put in a plug for the fact that I believe Amy Coney Barrett is going to be a force for godliness and good. As a strict constructionist, as a jurist who doesn't want to make policy, she wants to analyze laws based on how they fit in our Constitution. So.
And I remember last election 4 years ago that I thought that the Supreme Court was the number one issue. I really believe that was the number one issue.
Well, and again, I'll agree with you. I'll take it a step further and say the possibility of Supreme Court nominations was the only reason I voted for President Trump. And in a more general sense, I would say what's impressed me the most about him is he's kept his promises. Love him, hate him, like him or not, he's done what he said he would do, from moving Israel's capital, or moving our embassy rather, to Israel's capital in Jerusalem, to actually making Mideast peace agreements with 3 Arab nations so far. Even our dear friends at the Nobel Committee, he's received 3 Nobel Peace Prize nominations. It's a little bit unheard of because the Nobel Committee and their members are no right-wing radicals. So that's pretty good. Anybody disagree with a vote for President Trump and Vice President Pence? Hand him the...
I don't disagree. I just think that Trump is doing everything he can to aggravate the independent voter, because every time he opens his mouth, he does stupid.
Well, and it's interesting.
And every time he tweets, he does stupid.
I hear you, and this is going to be an area where we're going to disagree. And it's funny because it's also an area where I disagree with a great man, Al Mohler, in this letter that he sent out. I think the phrase he used is, every time he tweets, it literally drives me up a wall. Here's my take on that. And Ray, I'm not diminishing what you're feeling. I hear you. This is how America fights our wars. We don't have military juntas that come in and take over at the barrel of a gun. We fight verbally. Do I wish, as a pastor and as a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ, that President Trump wouldn't use profane language? Absolutely. It really bothers me when he uses profane language in tweets and when he uses profane language in his rallies. But Sean Hannity asked him a question a couple of weeks ago. He said, Mr. President, are you going to be a kinder, gentler president in a second term? And the president unfailingly says exactly what comes out. And he said, Sean, the only reason we get anything done is because I fight. And I'd rather not have to fight, but it's what I have to do to get things done. The manner can bother me, but I will tell you, as someone with a lengthy political background, I prefer his manner to Senator Mitt Romney, who is one of the kindest, most gentle-spoken weasels ever to hold political office in America. When he announced that he was going to vote in favor of Justice Amy Coney Barrett, people were thanking him online. Oh, Senator Romney, thank you so much. It's so important. And I commented, even a blind squirrel finds a nut every so often, because I'm sorry, Senator Romney, and I don't mean to unduly pick on him because I could have chosen 57 different examples, but Senator Romney is a great example, in my view, of what everyone wants a conservative to be. Someone who is gracious and kind and soft-spoken and loses every single time. I do not believe we should be dishonest. I do not believe we should cut corners in any way, shape, or form. But I do believe that we should fight. And for better or worse, President Trump fights. And like I say, you know, it causes ripples up my spine every so often when the profanity comes out, but I've never seen anybody that knows how to control a news cycle by flicking the end of the nose of his opponents. And so anyway, with that said, I think for whatever different reasons we have, we've agreed that as believers, the best vote for us is to vote for President Trump and Vice President Pence's reelection. Congressional District 9 is Jerry McInerney running against a man named Tony Amador. Anybody have any thoughts on either of those gentlemen? And let's leave it on for the rest of the hour.
I don't know Amador, but McNerney, I've heard a lot about him. This is actually the first year I've really tried to get acquainted with who's running and their outlook on California.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, it's just right now it's a learning phase.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts? Does anybody know the background of Mr. McInerney, Congressman McInerney? Congressman McInerney is a very, very liberal Democrat. I will tell you that through our lens, he supports abortion up to the moment of birth. I should also tell you that most of these Democrats will deny that that is their beliefs, and yet what is actually word for word true is they oppose any restrictions on abortion. They beat that drum that women have a right to control their own bodies. They do have a right to control their own bodies. As it happens, Miss Vanessa is pregnant and going to make me a grandpa again. And she has full rights to control her own body. But just this week, she went and had a sonogram. And there's a separate life inside of her that even very early in this pregnancy has its own separate heartbeat. The problem for the left these days is there are pictures inside the womb. And that's my grandbaby in there. That is not a lump of tissue or a cluster of cells. And so the Bible is very clear, and for all of the reasons, in my view, that we are supporting President Trump's reelection, Tony Amador is the right vote. As quickly as I say that, I'm going to upset him if he sees this. He has about as much likelihood of beating Congressman McInerney as my left shoe has of becoming the king of Siam, because he doesn't have enough money, he doesn't have enough organization. His policy positions line up very nicely with our views, so he'll receive my vote. But it's quite sad in my view that Barry said because he's running in California. I actually think it would be very possible to beat Congressman McInerney if someone had the time, the commitment, and the ability to raise the money. And we'll leave the rest of that for another time. State Senate District 5, I actually want to show you a flyer for Democrat Susan Talamantes Eggman. This goes to your comment about California. In California, because we have become such a one-party state, candidates brag about being Democrats. What that tells us is that we automatically cannot vote for her based on the party platform. And remember, we went through their party platforms. That's how we analyzed the two parties, is through their own words. And so then the only question is, do we know enough about Mr. Ridenour to vote for him? And I don't know if any of you have any knowledge of his background. Ivan, no. Barry, no. Katie, no. Law enforcement background, okay. To be honest, I haven't looked deeply into him this cycle, but I did 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, I found him to be someone that I can vote for. And so I actually will be casting my vote for him. Assembly District 9 is a re-election campaign for Assemblyman Jim Cooper. Assemblyman Cooper is, in my view, the poster child for why we have to start watching candidates early, because Assemblyman Cooper has it in his mind that he's going to continue to move up and move up and move up and move up. And he is a very, very left-leaning liberal man. He's a member of the California State Assembly, District 9. It does, so maybe the district line falls in between my house in Lodi and your house out in Murata. And who are the candidates in District 13? Okay, so Kathy Miller, here's the thing to know about Kathy Miller. She is very close friends with Stockton Mayor Michael Tubbs. They are partners in a scheme to give the San Joaquin County Fairgrounds either to the state of California or to some form of a state commission to turn it into a large and permanent homeless encampment. They haven't sought to any knowledge that I can find, they have not sought any input from the county or the rest of the city council. It's very similar to what Mayor Tubbs tried to pull with Swenson, with the golf course. And it didn't work there, and I don't think it's going to work with... are we getting feedback out of a microphone somewhere? There we go. Okay. I do not know anything about Mr. Villapudois. I do not believe he is married to the judge. Yes. Okay. So our local court reporter knows that they're not married, but you said they are related? Okay. I would vigorously recommend against a vote for Kathy Miller. She's another one who is working to move up rank and up rank and up rank. People often start on the school boards and they move up from school board because you can get name ID in a school board election and then make your way along. And the better name ID you get in a district, then you can move up to the next seat and the next seat and the next seat. Some will go from school board to city council. Some will go from one to county board of supervisors. And then if they have aspirations, then they'll continue to move up to assembly, senate, Congress, a state senate, I should say, and then on into Congress from there. So, school board. I think a number of us are in different school districts. I'm in Lodi Unified School District, and just to give you an idea, there are several candidates for school district, and I will tell you that my instinct is to vote against all school board members right now because of how they've handled COVID. I actually had a very helpful and enlightening discussion with a retired school principal who agreed with my assessment that, especially in San Joaquin County, and I think it's true all over California, we have a county Office of Public Instruction, and our school boards are seeming to, almost to a man or woman, simply say, well, we have to follow the directives of our county Office of Public Instruction. My answer to that is, then why do we have a school board? One or the other of them needs to leave. We either need to extinguish the county Office of Public Instruction because we have a state education bureaucracy, and if they give us suggestions for how we can do, my estimation is that our school boards should then be the deciders if the mandates or the suggestions, I should better say, from the state fit our county situation. We can't make county offices of public instruction accountable, but we sure can make school board members accountable, and I've seen far too little in my estimation in Stockton Unified, in Lodi Unified, and in Lincoln Unified. And just in case you're curious, I just stomped on a whole bunch of toes. all at the same time. And I'll say this as graciously as I can. Sorry, not sorry. You school board members, there's going to be groups of us that are going to be coming for you in the next couple of years. You're getting a lot of free pass this time around, but I got to tell you, things are going to start to change because there's going to be slates of candidates, if I have anything to say about it, that are going to run, and we're going to have school boards that will actually have opinions of their own. So I would say that for now, my advice is tread softly in voting for school boards. For my own school board race, I am putting a call in to Ron Freitas, and I want to have a conversation with him directly. I will say this, Mr. Freitas, if you see this before we talk, when I told my wife my plan, she said, well, he's not going to call you back. That's not because she knows you or thinks ill of you. It's how ill she thinks of all elected officials. And I have much more confidence in a local elected official's ability and willingness to talk to a very specific voter. So I'll be leaving you a message if I don't talk to you directly tomorrow, my friend. City Council in Lodi. I want to show you some literature. Some of the ways we make decisions in these low-level races is by what shows up on our doorknobs. That's a door hanger. Got us a little spot for the doorknob. They're pretty cool. That one was for Mikey Hoti. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I don't mean any disrespect. This is for Hector Madrigal. And this is for Mr. McKnight. And Mr. McKnight is a businessman. He's actually a DJ and has run quite a number of private businesses. I will say I'm almost as frustrated with Lodi City Council as I am with Lodi Unified School Board because in my view, Lodi's City Council has two problems. One is they love bureaucracy. They love creating programs and spending money. When I don't think that's always the right thing to do. But my bigger problem with them leaves me with not a good option to vote for because these guys love to tax things. And you're going to see that there's a Measure X on the Lodi ballot. And they want to raise $250,000 by taxing the marijuana farms. And this happens to be the issue that in a close call, my instinct was to vote for it in the sense of a sin tax. And Kirk Reynolds, I think quite wisely pointed out to me, that gives off the impression that we're supporting marijuana, and it also means that the more we tax it, the less likely we are to try to close it down in the future as we find out bad things about it. So thank you, Kirk. I appreciate your wisdom, and I'll be voting no on Measure X. So, hey, we got the very last one out of the way right now. Any questions about any other elective offices, people that we haven't mentioned that we need to talk about? Stockton Mayor, thank you, Ray. Very easy call. It's a very simple call because President Trump 4 years ago said to the black community in America, what the blank do you have to lose? I would suggest that the same is true with a vote for Kevin Lincoln. What I hear of his background, I'm quite impressed. Don't know him well, but after, in my estimation, the disaster that Michael Tubbs has been for Stockton, nearly unto criminal disaster that he has been for Stockton, I think it's a very easy call. Well, Ray says under the thumb of Oprah Winfrey. I would suggest it's not under the thumb as much as in the same vein that George Soros likes to buy offices all over America. Oprah has dabbled in our politics. And again, I believe with my whole heart that she means well, but she doesn't know this guy, and she's wrong. So, yes, I would say absolutely it's time for Stockton to have new leadership. Yes, and Michael Tubbs has been a pastor in the future. I'm not completely certain whether he still is. In the past, yes. What did I say? He has been in the future? Yeah, well, that's sort of that Back to the Future, Michael J. Fox. Yeah, see, so don't vote for Michael J. Fox. Vote for Kevin Lincoln. So there you go. All right. The big, I don't want to get too deeply down the rabbit hole of Oprah, but I will say this. Oprah Winfrey is in no way a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ. She believes that there are many paths to heaven. She believes that ours might be one of those ways, except she believes that we're far too narrow-minded about it, because we know that the Bible teaches that there is only one way to get to heaven, and that's trusting in Jesus Christ alone for our salvation. For those of you watching in from the outside, we're pretty well trained at landing on that word alone, because we need people to know the truth that Jesus wants everyone to join him in heaven, but that God made a very specific path for that to happen. So let's jump into our propositions. The first one is Proposition 14, and Proposition 14, on the sheet of paper that you have, I refer to it as the stem cell bond. And just so you understand that I'm not intending to be unfair in any way, it says authorizes bonds continuing stem cell research initiative statute. So it is a bond issue. I will tell you this. My instinct is always to vote no on bonds in California for a couple of reasons. One is the state of California has not proven itself to be able to spend money wisely. And two, they use it as a back door. They use these bonds as a back door to raise our property taxes to make them even less affordable than they are right now. Somebody give me your take on this particular bond issue. Any reasons to vote yes or no?
That it actually can go into the general fund. So why give money to somebody for something they're not even going to use?
Okay, that is one reason. I don't think that's an issue in this specific bond, and for my 2 cents, I think I would be happier if that was the case, because I think it would be less harmful, possibly. Anybody else know any background on Prop 14? First of all, we talked about the life issue. Stem cell research means taking stem cells from aborted babies, using them for research. It's heart-rending that people suffer from diseases. Parkinson's comes immediately to mind. My father-in-law suffers from age-related dementia. A lot of the dementias, they do research using stem cells, but using stem cells from aborted babies is wrong, because you have to kill the baby for that to happen. And Ray is pointing out that if they used adult stem cells, it might well change my opinion. It wouldn't change my opinion on a bond. I called this the 2 strikes initiative, because strike 1 is it's a bond, and strike 2 is that it's using, and by the way, Ray, you can verify this for me with your medical background. The reason they are starting to use adult stem cells is because they finally seem to start to realize that adult stem cells are every bit as effective in their research as using stem cells from aborted babies. So one less reason to be setting out to kill our babies. So mine will be a no vote for Prop 14.
Also, when they use language like the authorizes $5.5 billion state bonds for stem cell and other medical research. When they start to get into something other and it's not pinpointed,
when they haven't identified it. And Barry, that's a very wise point to pick out. It's important that they tell us specifically what they're going to do with it, and they don't, and they haven't clearly in this one as well. So I appreciate that as well. So Prop 15 I have called the Commercial Industrial Tax Assessment. The guide here says increases funding sources for public schools, community colleges, and local government services by changing tax assessment of commercial and industrial property. It's an initiative constitutional amendment. Give me your take. Barry says this wipes out 13. What it does, that's an accurate statement. It wipes out Proposition 13 for commercial and industrial properties. And here's what that means is Prop 13 was passed in 1986, I believe, and it was a constitutional amendment driven by a man named Howard Jarvis. And it was called the Jarvis Tax Initiative. And the purpose of Prop 13 was to limit the rate of increase of the property taxes of properties in California. And it has helped people stay in their homes. It has helped keep rents lower. It's helped. The problem that I have with Prop 15 is if you raise commercial and industrial property taxes, the landlords are going to raise rents because they're business people. They have to make money. We can argue whether they're making too much money, but if they're making too much money, then you don't have to rent from them. And so when you jack up their property taxes, then the rents go up. If the rents go up, then the business owner who's paying the rent raises his prices, which causes inflation. And then my other issue with Prop 15 is I view it as simply a money grab. And part of what I wanted to show you with Prop 15 is sometimes it's quite easy to look at who's supporting an initiative to get an idea through our worldview lens how we should be voting. So this came in my mailbox. You figured out by now here and here that I am a conservative Republican, and in the state of California it doesn't matter. This initiative is endorsed by the California Democratic Party, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom. It's endorsed right there. That tells me that because they do not share my worldview, it's likely that the initiative that they're backing isn't going to fit into my worldview. Just to get it said, this does not in and of itself mean that I think any or all of these people are evil people. What it does mean is that they do not share my worldview. It's as simple as that. And one of the things that I hope we can get back to in the next few years, and you can blame President Trump for it, or you can blame whoever you like for it, I would suggest that it started earlier. We need to be able to disagree with each other agreeably. I need to be able to say, listen, my Democrat friends, let's talk about worldview. Let's talk about the specific issues and how what the Bible teaches affects. But for the purposes of Prop 15, again, I'm a no vote as much as anything else because of who a yes vote is. And also for all the reasons that I shared a minute ago. And Ray says it takes a sledgehammer to Prop 13. And let me just say, it's only one of the swings that's being taken at Prop 13 this time around. And so it's hard to disagree. They're using a couple of different hammers to try to undo Prop 13. And they're also, I think, quite underhanded sometimes in how they do it. Notice that it says that it's to increase funding sources for our schools. It's for the children. It's for the children. It's for the college students. It's for our local government services. Boy, I'll tell you, doesn't that tug at your heartstrings? And if I didn't know better, it would tug at my heartstrings. And again, the Bible teaches personal responsibility and individual wisdom. Therefore, we want our taxes to be paid to the most local level possible. Because when we pay our property taxes to the school district, effectively, the vast bulk of it goes to the school district, I can walk into a school board meeting and I can make those men and women accountable. They can hear directly from me. I haven't done it in Loda Unified yet, but years ago I did in Elk Grove Unified, and you know what? A great bunch of men and women up there, and they listened attentively. And they actually made some changes based on some recommendations and a veiled threat. The same threat I issued here tonight. If our elected officials are not following our worldview, we run against them, or we find people to run against them, and we get new people in there. So, hey, time is ticking by. Prop 16. I call it the Racial Preferences Initiative. It says allows diversity as a factor in public employment, education, and contracting decision. This was put on the ballot by the legislature, and I'm just going to say because they never could have got the signatures by having people sign petitions. Permits government decision-making policies to consider race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in order to address diversity by repealing constitutional provisions prohibiting such policies. A number of years ago, I believe it was Prop 209 that California passed rather overwhelmingly, saying we are a colorblind society. We are not a racist society. And I'm sorry, Prop 16 is racism on its face. And it's not that I mean to cut off much discussion, but as believers, we've already said we have no room for racism. There should be no preferences. Now, let me just say this. There are some things that need to change. When the quality of your education is different based on your zip code, that's wrong. And we need to do things to help level that out. But the best solution for that is education choice in the elementary and high school ages, so that people in disadvantaged zip codes have a chance to go to better schools. If those property tax monies went directly in the form of a voucher to the parents in those disadvantaged zip codes, they're not going to go to those cruddy schools right down the street. They're going to go find a better school for their kids, and what's going to happen to the cruddy schools down the street? They're either going to get their act together and improve dramatically, or they're going to go bye-bye. So, anyway, we do not support racism in any form, under any fashion, even while we recognize that there are some things in the education system that we need to work on. Yeah, very little has been said about Prop 16. They're hoping it'll just slide through with their little happy, friendly language. But again, this is why we, as believers in Christ, have to do our homework very carefully. Prop 17 might cause some discussion, interestingly. I call it the ex-con Voting Rights Initiative. Restores the right to vote after completion of prison term, and it is another proposition that the legislature put on the ballot. I'm wondering if any of us in the room here, Ivan, have an opinion on this proposition.
More than willing to receive Social Security or anything where they don't have to work. So they're more than willing to vote for the Democratic Party.
Now, so if you think about it, Ivan, and by the way, Ivan never restrains me from talking about this openly, which is why I called on him the way I did. You just heard for our live streamers, Ivan referencing having been in the system. Ivan is saved by grace, just like all of us. And on a human scale, he got into some trouble that cost him 6 years of freedom away from his family. And so this is also very personal for me because my daughter's birth mother has spent significant amounts of her time in her life, as also her biological father, in the system, as you put it, and in and out of prison. And so my take is a little...
Can you just fill us in on what is the law right now? If you've served if you've done time,
right
what is the
right
law
now, well, let me ask it this way: have your voting rights been restored, Ivan? Okay, so as long as you're on parole, your voting rights, you still can't vote. And let me tell you why I think that's a really wise system. Especially in California, we've become so much quicker to let people out with shorter and shorter sentences, which gives them less and less time to... The threat of longer punishment is a deterrent. And so the less time people spend paying for their crimes, for their mistakes, the less likely they are to have been rehabilitated. Now, just like with Prop 16, I'm going to argue that there are issues that we need to undertake. There are ways that I think we can help reduce the return rate of people back to prison, but that's not what this is about. And so my view is that if you want your rights restored before you get off parole, you ought to be able to petition like a parole board and say, listen, there's a reason why, because, if you serve a 30-year sentence and then you're put on 10 years of parole when you get out, and I don't even know if those numbers make any sense, but or even 5 years of parole, and there's a specific reason, or perhaps give the governor a right to restore voter rights by individual in the same way that governors can commute sentences right now, I'd be open to that. But I am instinctively against anything that is going to communicate to people who have made criminal mistakes, it's not that big a deal. No, it's just not that big a deal. No, don't worry about it. You've done your time. And we do. As Christians, we believe in redemption. We believe in restoration. Ivan, for those of you listening in from outside, sits on our elder board. We don't have to take questions from people who say, well, you don't believe in restoration. Believe me, we do. And in case you're curious, I'm the one that recruited him to our board. Because I know the man, I know his character, I know that in God's eyes, his sin isn't any worse than mine, and I know that in God's eyes, his repentance is every bit as sincere as anybody could ever have. And so with that said, I'll vote no on Prop 17, but I'd be open to making adjustments in the system. I would look for them to be much more on a case-by-case basis. So you agree that would be a good approach. Okay, good. Thank you for that, Ivan. I appreciate that. Prop 18, I called it the 17-year-old voting initiative just because I couldn't bring myself to call it the Have You Lost Your Flippin' Mind initiative. What did I call it? It's Prop 18 with 17-year-olds. That's why it's confusing my brain. So I'm flipping the page here. The idea here is that if you are 17 and you will be 18 before the next general election, then in non-federal elections you can vote in primaries. And the reason it's non-federal is because states do not have the right to dictate federal voting laws, and this would never get passed at a federal level. So my take on this, and I'm just going to say, first of all, the legislature put it on there. Why? Because it's a power grab. They're looking for more easy, cheap votes. A public education system that teaches leftist doctrine at nearly every age, often these days even starting in kindergarten, is looking to create new voters. My other practical reason is I'm actually kind of the opinion, yes, I'm half joking. I'm only half joking, but I'm half joking. I don't think you should be able to vote until you're old enough to be off of your parents' insurance. Not shooting at you specifically, Miss Katie, but it's laughable to me that we allow children. You're a full-grown woman. You're an adult woman. But the culture calls you a child by putting you on your parents' insurance until you're 26 years old. I think it's outlandish. Can I just be honest and tell you? Got married when I was 22 years old. How old are you, dear? Yeah, you're 22. So I got married December before I turned 23 in February. Well, that's because we haven't found a guy yet that we'll put up with. We ain't found one good enough for you yet, dear. And I may not have a deciding opinion, but I sure have a vocal one about the man that's going to be good enough for you. So, but by the time I was 26, I had 3 kids. I'd bought my first house. I was a self-employed businessman. I had a career that, by God's grace, was doing this. So by that time, boy, you're ready to vote. 17-year-olds casting a vote that would actually have something that would be valid. I mean, if they said, oh, we want to just let 17-year-olds vote to give them the experience, but we're not going to count them, I'd have to know, okay, show me the shredder that those ballots are going to go through. Because we just learned today that in Texas, they caught a very wide voter fraud ring in San Antonio, and the news is actually still coming out. Literally, the woman on a videotape took credit for 50,000 illegal votes. If she hasn't been arrested by now, she will be arrested tomorrow by the state Department of Justice in Texas because they actually got her on video. Now, don't tell anybody, she said, because I don't look good in stripes. And she was talking to an undercover reporter with a video camera rolling at the time.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. If it says that it amends the Constitution to permit 17-year-olds to vote in a primary or a special election, if they're going to turn 18 by the time the actual election is being
by the
held.
next general election, yes. No, which typically in California, our primary election is in June, and then the general election is in November.
So it's those 5 months.
And I think this year it was in March because of...
So to me, it actually gives you a better idea of, in a primary, if those people are going to vote. You're not talking about a whole lot of votes. I don't see...
Oh, I think you're talking about a lot more votes than you think.
I don't think that you're talking about... But those people are going to vote anyway.
Not the 17-year-olds.
But they're going to vote in the general election when they're 18.
Right. But, so think it's okay to give them a say. You're giving them a say of who shows up on the ballot. This is a good question. California has what's called a jungle primary for its statewide offices. What that means is the top 2 vote getters, regardless of party, go on to the general election ballot, which means if the top 2 vote getters by raw vote are both Republicans, then there is no Democrat on the ballot. If what the more likely scenario is in California right now is that both candidates will be Democrat candidates, and if you add public educated 17-year-olds, this video is going to get used against me when I run for school board, by the way, and I'll defend it. And I will. I'll stand up and defend it. But if you allow public educated 17-year-olds to vote in the primary, they are going to have, and I think a frequent influence over who's going to show up on that general election ballot, so it'll limit your choices there. And based on what I see, having a daughter who's a high school senior this year and watching her the last 4 years in a public high school, government teachers, if not the school themselves directly. Now, my daughter goes to Tokay. Eric Sandstrom is the principal. He is a terrific man. Eric, love you, bro. Seriously, and you know it. He's a good man. But do not be surprised. It goes to what you said earlier, Barry, about what's not said. The other uses of the bond money. If there's not a prohibition in here for the political parties to hand out literature in the high schools, I'd bet my next paycheck that that's exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be overt campaigning for those 17-year-olds. There's ballot harvesting is legal in California, meaning I could go into the high school and I could say, hey, when you're done casting your votes, I'll collect them up and I'll make sure they get there for you. So as a wonderful exercise in every government class, the government teachers are going to see this, and I'm not even being critical of them right now, because if I was a government teacher and this was the law, I would feel obligated to say, okay, we're all going to vote, and then those of you who are 17, I'm going to take your ballots and turn them in for you. If you're 16, I can't because it's not part of the law, but the rest of you, I'm going to turn them in for you because, again, I would see it as
if
a
you're
good...
17 and you will be 18 by the time.
Correct. If you fit the mold of this vote. And by the way, the other thing is that what the Democratic Party does far better. Remember, I'm the guy that is referred to, and don't take this too much, don't take it too much, don't overstate it, that we have a two-party system in California, the evil party and the stupid party. And I'm a grudging member of the stupid party, okay? I'm not saying you're all evil. It's just a way of distinguishing with a little cheap humor. The evil party plays the long game really well. Their long game goal is 16-year-olds voting in every election. So this is a stepping stone.
This is just a tip of the iceberg.
It is a step along the way.
Because I do agree that I really believe that you should almost be out of your parents' house by the time you actually vote, so that you're actually feeling what it's like to be an adult and actually understanding what you're voting for.
And the greatest reason for that is a comment that Ivan made relative to when you're studying for a master's degree, it's different. You're in a different category. So don't you pick on your daughter. All right. Good. Okay, so you're being a good daddy over there. I would have expected nothing less. Ivan made the comment earlier about men who are in prison voting their values, which is voting for a bigger paycheck for me, voting for more stuff for me. It's the same thing. Until you're out in the real world, earning a living. Now, getting an education is in a different category. It is a legitimately different category, especially when you're studying seriously the way Katie does, specifically aiming for a career where the master's degree is going to help with it. That's a different issue. But the bottom line is we need to keep the voting age at very least where it is. I think you could make a pretty strong argument for a 21-year-old voting age, again, like we used to have. Keep in mind, we talk about playing the long game. They got the law from 21 to 18. Now they're trying to go to 17. Ultimately, they're going to go to 16. Based on indoctrination. And again, that's my, and I'm going to clarify something that I've said. I've taken some pretty hard shots at public education. I believe that teaching is one of the most underappreciated professions that exists. And I could talk for a lot longer than we have tonight about why I think we have such problems in education right now. But teachers, hear me say, it's not because of you. It's because of a system that you've been put into. And I think it's ghastly, and I think it's dastardly, and I welcome conversations in the future about how I think both teachers and paraprofessionals need to be treated a whole lot more like the professionals they are, and a whole lot less like babysitters. Enough said. Prop 19 is I call it property tax rules. And it says changes certain property tax rules. Can you be any more vague? Sadly, I believe this is going to pass, because hear what it says. And by the way, one of the questions we haven't answered is, these descriptions, where do they come from? They come from our corrupt state attorney general. And the state attorney general in California is who writes the summaries. And when we have a corrupt state attorney general, like we had with Kamala Harris, and now like we have with, I believe it's Attorney General Becerra, yes, allows homeowners who are over 55, disabled, or wildfire disaster victims to transfer primary residence's tax base to replacement residence, changes taxation to family property transfers, establishes fire protection service fund. Doesn't that sound wonderful? So what they've done is they have said that in exchange for helping people who are 55 and older carry a lower tax base from a one county to another, we're going to again work on dismantling Proposition 13. And the most nefarious thing that happens with Prop 13, which, by the way, it says local governments could gain tens of millions of dollars of property tax revenue per year. How would they gain that revenue if they're lowering the tax base? For part of how they do it is when you die 40 years from now, God willing, and your 3 children inherit your house, it's instantly reassessed. And so they don't have any option to hang on to that beautiful home that you guys have spent decades turning into the wonderful place that it is. They're not going to be able to afford to stay anymore, because they're going to go from that low tax base that you have to a very high tax basis for it. And another lesson that we can learn in how to evaluate these propositions is noticing who is for and who is against a proposition. And in this case, the ones who are officially against in this voter reference guide is the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And they're the ones, he says, Proposition 19 is a $1 billion tax increase on families. It takes away one of the best tools parents have to help their children. The right, enshrined in California's Constitution since 1986, Prop 13, to pass their home and other property on without any increase in property taxes. So the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association, which has been a friend to California's families for 34 years now, is the one leading the charge against it. Sadly, I'm not sure I've seen enough out there against it, so I suspect it's going to pass, but hopefully it will not pass because of our votes. And Ray, you're making a very astute observation. They put warm fuzzies into these things to help make them palatable, to help people fall into their trap, because they're going to help a few people for the sake of, see, how few people in California are going to benefit in the short term from moving from one place to another and carry that tax base with them, versus the percentage of us who are going to eventually die. 100% die. Very small percent, and their benefit is even short term, because their family is then going to get skewered. If what's worse, taking a $300,000 home in San Joaquin County that you have a $100,000 tax base on, and taking that to the Bay Area and buying an $800,000 home that now will have the $100,000 tax base, but then when you die, your kids are taking on the $800,000 tax base instead of the $100,000 that you'd have over here. It's gonna drive the next generation out of family homes. It's just one more step in California not valuing families, sadly, if that passes. Proposition 20, limited parole. This is one of the most backward of the initiatives that's on the ballot, because when you read it, you should want to limit parole. Doesn't that mean that there's less parole, that people are having longer prison sentences? Anyway, here's what it does. It is calling for longer prison sentences. It's saying make people serve more of their time before they're allowed out on parole. Again, this is another one that is very personal for me. The last time Ellie's birth mother, which, by the way, I want to say it publicly, we love her. We want nothing more than for her to become a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ. My daughter actually had an encounter with her this evening, and Ellie is desperate for her mom to know Jesus. So it's not that we have ill will, but she committed some pretty serious crimes for which the sentence was to be 7.5 years. And 6 or 8 years ago, however long ago it was, in between the guilty verdict and her sentencing, California passed laws taking 5 of the felonies and making them into misdemeanors, so that her sentence went from 7.5 years to 26 months. And they said it was because the crimes were non-violent. Every one of her crimes was violent against my daughter. They might not have been violent against other individuals in the sense of using a knife or using a gun. Going into someone's garage in the middle of the night when you're high, I would say is violent, and that one did stick as violent. But leaving a daughter home alone, leaving a daughter with strange men, never knowing which man was going to be there. And Gene, I'm sorry. I know I'm talking publicly, and you know what you did, but there's redemption for you, dear, and you know that we love you, and you know we want restoration. But if people aren't paying for crime, then they commit crime again. So the much bigger issue is it becomes a public safety issue. We become less safe as a culture if we don't have people serving significant sentences. And yes, there are times where crimes don't fit, where the punishment doesn't fit the crime. I'm actually quite a believer in seeing if we can't come up with better rehabilitation systems than what we have. This is going to be my little grenade against the VA rehab system. It's a scam, it's a sham, it's fake, it's phony. The reoffending rate is massive, and y'all lie about it all the time, and you know you're lying about it. Sorry, went on a tangent for a moment. The state legislature is disassembling the state prison system, and I would even say, though, Ray, that it is well-intentioned on their part. They think, well, the system is so unfair, we're just going to end it and thereby make it more fair. Instead, it's going to ruin public safety in California. It's going to make us less safe, and it's not going to help people. What we could do and should do is organizations like Teen Challenge, organizations like the Salvation Army, have drug rehab programs that are extraordinary. They get people help. I think of our friend Audra, who went through the program at Salvation Army and is thriving today. And there are many, many, many examples. But for every example like those two, there are 50 that are scams like the VA system that gives them enough money that they don't have to break the law and steal things for a much longer period of time, so it makes it look like they're staying clean longer when they're not. And it's atrocious, and it's ghastly, and it was what was done to my daughter's birth mother, and it breaks my heart for my daughter, and it breaks my heart for Jean for what she's had to go through. So It's very interesting. What Ivan's referencing is what are called mandatory minimums. The legislature passed laws saying, well, judges aren't always fair, so we're going to tell you what the sentence has to be for this specific crime. And the problem is, when you fail to understand human nature, you're going to make these mistakes, and you're going to make them on one extreme, and then you're going to make them on the other extreme, and then it's going to just swing back and forth, and you're going to keep screwing it up. Because the Bible teaches that there is no one righteous, not even one. The Bible teaches that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Well, what that means is that we're all sinners, but when you break a law, there are consequences, just like when I sin as a recovering alcoholic. If I go home tonight and I drink a fifth of whiskey, there's going to be consequences for that mistake, for that sin in my life. If I drive, then there are public consequences, but whether I drive or not, there are private consequences for sin. So when you live in a culture that believes that people are basically good, then they want to minimize the consequences for, well, but that's just bad behavior. That's a mistake. That's an accident. No, that's called sin. Sin is anything we think, say, do, or don't do that doesn't please God. It's anything, however big or small, and all sin is sin. We don't rank sins. On a human scale, Ivan's sin ranks pretty high. But on God's scale, my alcoholism, my struggle with profanity is on an absolutely equal footing. See? From the law standpoint, I scrub cleaner than you do, but you know full well in God's eyes, we're all equal in God's eyes. The difference is consequences for our sin. Right. Ivan's referencing the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. Right. And the truth is, Ivan, I have a little bit of a weird view on that as well. I would not have a problem if I believed that people were basically good. I would not have a problem with saying your sentence is until by your actions on a day-to-day basis you can persuade those who live among you and those who observe your behavior that you are rehabilitated, that you have repented. Penitentiaries were places, before we started calling them prisons, we called them penitentiaries. It comes from the same root as the word to repent, which means to turn away from one behavior to another. The goal of incarceration should never be punishment. It should be to help change behavior so that there's a higher likelihood that when you come out, you're going to be able to be a better functioning member of society. Because sadly, in my estimation, for every Ivan that comes out a completely changed man, absolutely to the bone, changed by Jesus Christ, there are 1,000 that aren't. And that makes me sad for them. I praise God for you and your family, that they get to see the changed man that you are, and that the relationships are being restored one at a time in further and further out circles in your family. We should crave that, but our system doesn't account for that. It's become all about punishment instead of about helping people to change their behavior. So, again, limiting access to parole, I believe, is a good thing. We should be having people serve more of their time, and then separately from that, we should be working to make those days more valuable in the rehabilitation process. 19 is a no, 20 for me is a yes. 21 is rent control. Instead of statewide rent control, it's local government rent control. And rent control, it says expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property. The problem with rent control is you end up limiting the amount of rental properties available, because people who build or buy rental properties to make a living can afford to buy fewer of them because they can make less money at it. And that's just a big problem. It's not capitalist. We are a capitalist country. We believe in supply and demand. We believe in a free market. We believe in freedom. And the result of this kind of rent control is, in whatever communities you have that rent control, you're going to have fewer rentals of lower quality. Because the other thing that's going to happen is, when you limit a landlord's ability to make money, what's the first thing he's going to do? Cut his own profit? No. He's going to cut the maintenance and repairs on the property back as far as he can. Instead of having on-site management, he's going to have off-site management. So then when you have something happen in your apartment, instead of having the on-site manager there to see it in a matter of minutes, the law gives them 24 hours already. It's going to take every nickel of those 24 hours to get somebody there to look at your problem. So you're not going to get your problems fixed as quickly. Again, this is because this is another issue that's caused by not understanding the nature of man, not understanding how people are going to react. So, any other comments on Prop 21? I'm moving rather rapidly and talking a little more than I intended to. It says, overall, a potential reduction in state and local revenues in the high tens of millions of dollars per year over time. And the reason for that is because you're going to have fewer properties. Exactly. And seeing the fiscal impact of that is an interesting little boomerang from some of the earlier stuff we've been talking about. Thanks for pointing that out, Ray. Very good. Prop 22, I call it the Rideshare Classification Initiative, or the Frank Initiative. Prop 22 is perhaps my easiest vote, because the chairman of our board at Valley Bible Church drives for Uber and Lyft. That's how he makes his living. And Frank wants to have the freedom to make a living. He wants to be able to drive when he wants to drive, where he wants to drive, and how he wants to drive. I've had some interesting conversations with him, because he says, I have to be careful which switch I flip on Uber or Lyft, because around here, especially, the instant you turn the app on, you get pinged, and once you're pinged the first time, you're going to keep pinging until you just have to force it off, because they don't actually have enough drivers. So if you believe in supply and demand, and if you believe in letting people decide for themselves how they want to make a living, Prop 22 says it's undoing a law that the legislature passed that said you have to classify them as employees. Well, that means that they're going to have far fewer drivers, so you're going to have far less access. Prop 22 came about because the taxi lobbies in the very large cities in California put a bunch of money up through lobbyists and said, this is not a fair playing field. Ours are employees, theirs are not. Well, it would be the same thing as 100 or so years ago, 125 years ago, the buggy manufacturers and the horse breeders saying, them automakers, they have an unfair advantage over us because they can go faster, so we need to make their vehicles go slower. That's not how it works. When technology moves forward, the taxi companies need to shift. If they can't make a living the way they're doing it, then they need to ask their drivers, well, would you rather be a driver for us on, an independent contractor as a driver. Problem is, the taxi cab companies make less money if they do it that way because then they have to profit share. So, Prop 22, the Frank Initiative. Vote yes. Prop 23 might be the most nefarious. It might be the most underhanded petition on the ballot. The ads are all against it, and I'm thankful for that because Prop 23 creates a problem where there isn't one. There are a large number of dialysis clinics in California. It interests me that Prop 23 wants to force doctors to be present in dialysis clinics, and the state legislature would never, ever, ever even allow a requirement for doctors to be present in abortion clinics. So, in a medical situation where you're killing unborn children, no, we can't force doctors to be in there. That makes it too hard for them to be able to kill the babies. And yet, for dialysis clinics, they want to require doctors to be in there. Did I get on my high horse a little bit there? My shoulders kind of came back even here. I'll relax just a little bit. I just find it to be very intellectually dishonest, is what I'm actually trying to point out. At least if they were being consistent, then I might say they have a leg to stand on. But this is on the ballot because there's a union that's behind it that has put up millions of dollars to get it qualified for the ballot because they can cut down the number of dialysis clinics and then they can demand more money on a supply and demand curve. And so it's just pretty dishonest. So for me, Prop 23 is a big no vote. Ray, what did you say? Big no. Good. Okay. And with your medical background, it means something to me. Right. And Ray's pointing out some of the warm fuzzies they think they're putting in there. The problem is when you put those kind of, you can't reduce hours, you can't turn people away for refusing payment, what you do is ultimately you reduce the number of dialysis clinics, and people die without dialysis. That they can't live without being hooked up and having their blood purified because their liver can't do it. So their kidneys can't do it. See, some people call it a liver, right? They're wrong, but that's what they do when they're a pastor, okay? You're all laughing at me. Oh, because I deserve it. Right, there we go. Yes, Ivan, yes, your comment. Okay, all right. Okay. Oh, long distance high five. Great. Let's see. Who wants to vote Ivan off the board? I'm kidding. Oh, that's the second time you've sung that. And I hope you're right about it. Prop 24 amends consumer privacy laws. Prop 24, boy, I think this is the third or fourth one that I've referred to as the most underhanded that's on the ballot. This is another underhanded one. Big Tech put this on the ballot because they like their power. It says permits consumers to prevent businesses from sharing personal information. It permits consumers to correct inaccurate personal information and limit businesses' use of sensitive personal information. By the way, sensitive personal information is in quotes. That means those words mean something and they're not telling you what they mean. It goes on and it says that it's going to cost at least $10 million a year. It's going to establish a California Privacy Protection Agency. Oh, isn't it going to be great that we could have a California Privacy Protection Agency that can get bought by Big Tech? What it does is it causes us to have fewer rights to challenge when our information is used incorrectly. The Californians for Real Privacy say about this that It allows pay for privacy schemes. It makes workers wait years to learn what confidential information employers collect on them, and it makes it harder to stop tech giants from selling your information. All I'm going to say about this is I think it's the wrong time to allow Twitter and Facebook, who are currently censoring political content based on their beliefs, to have more power over our privacy. Again, sadly, I think Prop 24 is going to pass, but it shouldn't. And it's going to bite us in the future. Prop 25, I call it the no bail law. Referendum on the law that replaced money bail with a system based on public safety and flight risk. This is where the yes vote and the no vote get tricky. A yes vote approves the no bail law, which means everybody gets out. A no vote rejects the no bail law. Here's the problem. That they're fixing a problem that exists. They're attempting to. People who have money can always get out of jail because they have money. I understand that that's a problem. The solution to that problem isn't to release every single person that you arrest, because what we see again and again and again is people are reoffending, sometimes within minutes, frequently within hours, and nearly ubiquitously within days. So while they would be behind bars waiting to make bail, or at least if they reoffended they would forfeit bail, they're out reoffending. It's another public safety issue. It makes it more difficult for us to be able to trust that we're safe. Is there a problem that needs some attention? I would say yes, probably. Linda, I'm interested in your perspective as a court reporter and having spent quite a number of years in a pretty tough courtroom. What's your take on the perceived inequity of... She doesn't want the microphone, that's okay. The perceived inequity that comes with having money to be able to post big, giant bails. And I know I put you on the spot, and if the answer is, Pastor, mind your own business until I have some time to think, yeah, we'll talk later. Good. Good enough. Fair enough. So, again, for public safety reasons, I would vote no on certifying the no bail law. We talked about the mayor's race already. We talked about Lodi Measure X already. And is it a marijuana tax? Wow. That is Measure X. If that is a county-wide, then it's good that we talked about it. For some reason, I'm having trouble seeing the piece of paper that I had about it. Yes. The last thing I want to point out before, well, there's two things left I want to point out really quickly. A lot of times you'll receive in your mailbox pieces of mail like this or like this. They're called slate mailers. This slate mailer is different than this in one respect. If you look and it tells you no on this, no, 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 yes, 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 there are no asterisks after them. If you look at this one, every one of them has an asterisk after it. The difference is this is called a paid slate mailer. So somebody paid to have themselves included on this mailer in every single case. They've every single one on this Election Digest page and back here, and that actually includes Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Everyone paid to be on here, and what happens sometimes is people will pay to be on what you would think would be an opposition mailer so that they can add to confusion and try to pick up votes. So if you want to play both sides against the middle and not be honest about who you are, you'll put yourself on slate mailers for both sides. And then if you're voting no on one proposition and somebody else is telling you to vote yes on a different one, and you're not watching carefully, it can confuse you. And so it's just another part of doing our homework. Most often, the only slate mailers that are not paid are the party slate mailers. And because of my voter registration, I receive Republican slate mailers. But I promise you, the Democratic Party does exactly the same thing. Where I want to close us for the night and for our 4 weeks is I want to ask you to indulge me, and I'd like to add a 5th meeting. And what I'd like to do is this coming Sunday morning at 8:30 a.m., whoever is able, I would ask to please come, please come, please come. Join us for a time of prayer for our nation. It's going to be an hour or less. It'll be a time of directed prayer. The purpose of it is to pray for our nation. It's not to pray for one party or another to win. It's because, remember, part of what we're talking about here is winning is in God's mind. He has His will in every single race. His will not be thwarted. But our job is to be godly. 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, if my people, God talking, if my people, God's people, who are called by my name, God's name, will humble themselves and pray and seek God's face. He says, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways. Us as believers. See, this isn't if the other party, if you dirty, rotten scoundrels that we're supposed to hate because you view things differently than us, if you'll change your way. No, God says it's my people who are called by my name, who need to humble themselves and pray, seek His face, turn from our wicked ways. So in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, if you can come and join us, that would be wonderful. I'm not going to ask Miss Vanessa to live stream this because, quite honestly, the goal of it is to be a very intimate time where we pray. Those of us who are able, we're going to get on our knees. We're going to bow our heads before our God. We're going to thank Him for the favor He's shown our nation from its founding up to today. We're going to repent of our collective sin. We're going to repent of our individual sin. And we're going to ask Him to heal our land as only He can. You know who I'm voting for president. If my chosen candidate wins that race, that's not a sign that God's healing our land. That's a sign that it's God's will, for whatever reason, for him to hold office for the next 4 years. I believe with all of my heart the only thing that will heal our land is if we believers humble ourselves before our God and confess our own sin and not point at other people, but make sure we're living godly lives that honor Him, that make Him look good, that please Him, that cause Him to be ready to say to us, well done, good and faithful servant, whenever it is that He calls us home to Him. Thank you for being here. I thank you for being here. Miss Vanessa, thank you so much for putting up with all of these hours that we've done this. You're such a blessing to me personally, but also to our church family. Thank you for all of you who are watching in from outside. God bless you, and pray for our country. Sunday.